I was a merchant, and I probably right around the same time as you. I think I heard about Shopify in 2000. It was like late 2009. And I had been running online stores since 1998.
Welcome to the Milk Bottle Shopify e-commerce podcast, brought to you by Milk Bottle Labs, Ireland's top-rated Shopify experts. Milk Bottle Labs build, upgrade, migrate and market Shopify and Shopify Plus stores all over the world. Milk Bottle will migrate you onto Shopify with zero interruption, guaranteed, or optimize your Shopify store and maximize store sales. This podcast is kindly supported by our favorite Shopify app and the only app we install in every store. Rewind.io is the leading backup solution for your Shopify store. We'll talk more about Rewind later. Now over to your host, founder of Milk Bottle Labs, Keith Matthews.
Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the Milk Bottle Shopify e-commerce podcast. Today's episode is a special one because I'm very lucky to have interviewed Jay Myers of Bold Apps from Winnipeg in Canada. Bold Apps are the largest Shopify app developers within the Shopify ecosystem and one of the largest employers in Winnipeg. The conversation was so enjoyable and entertaining that we actually ended up with 2 podcast episodes out of a single interview. So in part 1 for today, Jay gives us the history of Bold and shares an insider view into how he started Bold and how he now runs it. Jay's from Winnipeg, and it's an absolute delight to hear how proud Jay is to now be a major employer in his hometown. Make sure you check out the episode notes and take advantage of 2 months free from Bold Apps. So here goes. Jay Myers, co-founder of Bold Apps. Thank you very, very much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Jay, I am recording this from the back of my house in Dublin, and I'm always intrigued where the speakers are that are on the podcast. So what part of the world are you in?
We are in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. So we're right smack in the middle of the prairies. We're actually about 20 kilometers away from the geographical dead center of Canada.
Wow. And weather-wise, I had Rob Lane on recently, and he's based in Ottawa, and he was telling me about the weather. So is the weather, is it more extreme in Winnipeg?
Yeah, we get it bad. It's minus 35 in the winters, but we get really hot summers. So I'm a guy that loves 4 seasons. I snowmobile, and I love the fall. I love the spring. So like, I don't mind it. I think if I didn't enjoy different activities in the different seasons, it would be a long, boring winter. But personally, I enjoy it.
Just give us an indication, Jay, of the kind of style of place that Winnipeg is in terms of population. Is it a few 100,000 people, or is it 1 million, or what sort of size is the area?
Oh, yeah, it's decent size. We're just under 1 million. So like, I think the population of Winnipeg is about 800, but then there's, the surrounding towns and cities around it. So it's probably just over 1 million, I would guess, or in and around there. We're a very diversified city, like in a lot of ways, culturally and also industrially. Like the type of businesses here range from, like, there's a strong agriculture side, but there's also beginning to be a really strong tech and IT sector. And actually, just like in the last couple of years, a lot of big corporations are moving headquarters here to Winnipeg because it's one of those places where in the Midwest, the talent is strong. And I guess cost of living is still inexpensive compared to a lot of places in the country. So it's very affordable, and that's appealing to a lot of people. So they can, we've actually had probably 30 or 40 people relocate from various parts of the world to come live in Winnipeg to work at Bold. The idea that they can move here, have a house with a big yard in other parts of the country and other parts of the world are just an unrealistic dream. But here it's very, very, very realistic.
Yeah, and so I suppose I'm assuming that the other advantage then, Jay, as well, is the fact that you're not competing with, you're not in Toronto competing with other technology companies. And again, you'd probably be competing with Shopify. So it probably helps you to get talent in the long run.
Yeah, to get talent and to keep. It's, there's an interesting thing about just employees in our city. Like when someone starts here, like our turnover is almost nothing. So there's a huge cost when you're like, a couple of years ago, I read that Facebook at one point, I don't know if this probably isn't true anymore, but this was about 3 years ago. they had one of the best tenure rates in Silicon Valley, and it was 1.2 years. And you think about how long it takes someone to get ramped up, to learn their role, not just to learn it, but then to become proficient and then to actually make a huge impact in the company. Sometimes that takes half a year to get to that point. So if you're turning over on average every 1.2 years, there's a huge cost to that. So in Winnipeg, people start at a place and they're very loyal. They stay. It's, there definitely is people that go from one career to another, but drastically less, I think, than other cities. So we're able to have people around for a long time who become very deep knowledge of product and the space and the industry. And I think that's a huge advantage.
Do you also find, Jay, that maybe that there's guys maybe that you were in university with or that were in university when you were in university or in the same vintage that are actually using Bold as a reason to get back to Winnipeg? Maybe they've been away for 10 years. Are you getting locals like that returning?
We have had a few, yeah. And we've actually had a few people who, like, they've come in for an interview and they walk in and they go, holy cow, I didn't realize a place like this existed in Winnipeg. We're pretty fortunate. Our office is, we've got a couple offices now, but they're all still in Winnipeg. They're pretty cool. You walk in and, it's not conventional. People are rarely sitting at a desk and working. They're on couches or beanbags. We have a really cool big patio beside our building with a basketball court and picnic tables outside. And there's a lake that goes around our building. And so in the summer, most people are working outside, and on Fridays, the slip and slide comes out and there's arcade rooms and massage chairs and beer. So it's a fun place to be. And I think it's not traditionally maybe in San Francisco, you might see fun perks like that more common, but it's starting to become more common here. So a lot of times people will come in and just be like, wow, I didn't know this existed here. So
from the point of view then, from a founder turned individual now that's hiring people, you've basically created an environment which influences people to be more productive, and it's working, is it?
Yeah, there's really a difference. And I always emphasize this is there's a difference between perks and culture. And it's easy to get the two mixed up. It's easy to say, oh yeah, we've got catered lunches, beer on tap, foosball, arcade, pinball, whatever, all of that. Those are great perks. They make it fun to work. But what we view good culture is a place where people can really thrive, where they're challenged, where their opinions are valued, where they believe and they truly are making an impact in the company, where they're trusted, where they have a clear enough understanding of what the values and principles of the company are, that in the absence of leadership or whoever their manager is not being around them, they have the ability to make decisions. It's not oh, what's our policy on this? Let me read a book. They just have such a strong connection with company values. And that's what we believe culture is. And then all those perks around it that makes it fun to come to work. But it's not really the core of what makes people satisfied with their job, right? So
your growth has been phenomenal over the last couple of years. I'm just wondering, is that been a new phenomenon, or is that consistent, let's say, over the last 5 or 7 or 8 years? How has your growth curve been rising?
That's a good question. And early on when we started the company, we were at a point, and I don't remember exactly how many staff we had. It might have been around 10. But each time we hired someone, we kind of had this internal, oh shoot, we got to hire someone. Now that's there goes our profit. And so, you have a choice when you're just getting started and small. Do you just stay small and be a very profitable company, which is a great way to go? Or do you stay lean and maybe you could be a solopreneur, you could be a small, or you could be a growth company. And I think the thing that's important is just that you understand, because if you don't, for a while, we didn't know what type of company we wanted to be. And it was a bit of a internal stress every time we would hire someone. And then the 4 of us sat down one day and we're like, okay, well, what's our long-term goal with this company? And we kind of decided that we wanted our long-term goal was to grow as big as we possibly could, give very generous stock option plans to our staff, and one day hopefully make a big impact, not just in the lives of the merchants that use our apps, but in hopefully hundreds, maybe thousands of employees. And we were really inspired by a number of other, Shopify is actually a good one. We were very inspired when they went public and all the the spin-off of that, like all the lives that affected and the new startups that started in Ottawa and all the new like angel investors that are investing in things. And so that hasn't happened a lot in Winnipeg. And so anyway, so once we framed our kind of decision making like that, then we didn't look back. It was just like every time we made a little bit more money, we're like, okay, how many people can we hire? No, we can hire 2 more this month. Next month, okay, we can hire 5 more this month, or this month 1. It was just like we put 100% of everything back into people, like into growing the company. Yeah, so it sped up. In the early days, it was 1 or 2 a month. I think now we're probably onboarding. I think last month it was like 27 people in 1 month. So that was a larger month. But it would be no less than 15 people a month now is pretty common.
That's fantastic and well done. I mean, as I said earlier on, I've been following your story for years. When you go to a management meeting and someone explains, or your HR department tells you, oh yeah, just by the way, folks, we hired 25 people last month. Are you immune to that now, or does anybody react to it, or do you wonder, does anybody even realize where you guys started? Like, there must be a nice feeling when you hear that being announced on a regular basis.
I'll be honest, I think I'm actually less immune to it now. Like when we were like smaller, I knew every single person very well. It's hard. Like we have multiple buildings now. So there's some people I haven't even had a chance to meet yet. We make sure that we have lunch we do it in groups now, but like we make sure we have lunch with every single person that starts, so we get to know, even if whatever department they're in, whatever building. But like early on, you just know everyone. Now, at this stage, I don't know every single person starting. And I think it's even more humbling and just gives you a perspective when people they truly believe in the company and the vision and what we're doing, and they're joining. Like when someone joins a company, I look at it 2 ways. Like people they come in for an interview and then they're so thankful when they get to the job. And I often feel like I just say, well, thank you for choosing to make your career here. Like yeah, we gave you a job, but you also probably had 10 different options and you chose to come to Bold. And so we're very thankful when people choose that and to join and to build this thing with us. And so I think I'm very thankful and humbled for just the people that have, like when I walk around and I see everyone, it's just like yeah, sure, it's easy for me to want to build it because we kind of started it, but like it's harder for someone coming in now and joining and get, you know what I mean? So like I'm probably more sensitive to it now. So
I get you. I'm assuming then as you grow, I suppose it'll become harder. I've worked for some very large companies, and it's funny because the having breakfast with the new hires or having lunch with the new hires, it's the least thing you can do. And it's a good thing that you're doing. At least give, new hires a little bit of face-to-face time. So well done.
Yeah. And it's not just for the lunch. Like I think what happens is like sometimes I'll notice someone will start, don't really get to meet them for the first couple months because maybe we're in different departments or I don't see them. We have that lunch together. And then after that kind of they feel comfortable that like it's not just myself, it's like our whole executive team. And then I don't know, they just feel comfortable after that. And we always tell everyone like, hey, open door policy, like you can come and talk to us about anything. But until they have that initial lunch, they don't feel comfortable. But then after that, then they start coming like, hey, I've only been here 2 months, but I got this great idea for this. And I got this idea for this. And so it's really important on a lot of levels, not just to meet them, but also to kind of remove that maybe mental barrier that they have. So
Jay, let's go back to the start. I personally found Shopify around 2009, 2010. It wasn't available in Ireland.
Oh yeah. You were early on.
Very early on. And I remember going onto the Shopify website and they claimed to have, I think it was 25,000 customers. And then it changed to 50 and then it changed to 65. And I remember it went from 85 to 125. And finally Shopify was available in Ireland. And that's how I started. The only other, it was Chris Pointer's agency, Pointer Creative, and the Bold Apps business are the two kind of Shopify partners that I noticed in the early days. And I've followed the story for a long, long time. So I remember reading a story a long time ago about 4 guys that ended up in somebody's basement and they started this company called Bold. Can you give us an insight into that time and how you actually started?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Chris, I know Chris Pointer well. He's an amazing guy and has an amazing agency. There's a few of the old school original one's still around. He's a good one. So I was a merchant, and I probably right around the same time as you. I think I heard about Shopify in 2000. It was like late 2009. And I had been running online stores since 1998 was the first store I launched. When I built that store in 98, it didn't even have a shopping cart. It had products and a phone number to call. It was, I built it with Microsoft Front Page.
I was there.
Yeah. So, and then went through, fast forward, I guess almost 12 years later, I went through various platforms, was big on eBay for a few years. Like in the early 2000s, eBay was like what Amazon is now. Like everyone was selling on eBay. And then after a while, you realize you're really just renting customers. You're not building a brand or a business, and it makes good money. But anyway, so I started building sites. In 2009, I just heard about Shopify actually from an email from MailChimp, which coincidentally now they don't work together anymore. But so I got an email from MailChimp saying, "Hey, big news! We now have a Shopify app." Oh, what's Shopify? Clicks on the link. So I moved over one of my stores, and I think I was like store number 8,000 or something. So I was actually pretty early on as a merchant. And then one of the things I just loved being a merchant, at that time, I think Shopify was one of the first platforms that had the concept of an app store. It's fairly common now. Like a lot of e-commerce platforms have some type of an app store or a marketplace, but that was new. And when I saw that, I was just like a kid in a candy shop. Like every day I would go in, and at the time there was only 40 apps. So there was one new app a week. Now there's multiple new ones a day, but I would go in every couple days and see if there was any new app, and I would install every single app. And then of course I had 100 ideas of apps I wanted, because back then there was very, very little. So I was one day at a pub with one of my best friends, and I was like, "Hey, I think I want to build a Shopify app." And he actually helped run an e-commerce agency, and he's like, "What?" He had never heard of Shopify. So I kind of told him about Shopify, and he just said, "Hey, I know these two really good developers. Why don't we just build it and see if we can make a little beer money on the side?" It was kind of an experiment. And I thought, well, great, perfect, because then I can use the app on my store too. So we did that. We thought to ourselves, well, what's the easiest app we can build? The first app I really wanted was a product comparison app. So you pick multiple products and you click compare, and it stacks them up side by side, and you can compare features and specs. But we decided that one was a bit too hard. So we were like, well, let's just build an upsell app. That's a piece of cake. So it turns out here we are 7 days later, we're actually still adding features to that and building on that original upsell app. But we just, the basic original concept was you add something to the cart and a pop-up comes up and you're buying a leather jacket, and it's like, "Hey, would you like the leather treatment kit?" And it was a super simple thing to us in our heads, but what we didn't realize at the time was it was kind of revolutionary on Shopify, because it was the first time when we launched it, it actually took down Shopify. So some store ran a sale. It was the Chive. This doesn't happen anymore. This was a long time ago, but they would run a sale. And because of the amount of times that the app was popping up and the API calls were on the front end of the store, and there was no API throttling or anything back then. So Shopify went down.
Let's take a short break, and I'll share the one app we install on every Shopify build. The team at Rewind.io have developed the leading backup solution for Shopify. Did you know there is no way of recovering lost data from a Shopify store? Rewind.io automatically backs up your store data. In the event of a data loss, usually due to human error, Rewind enables you to rewind your store back to its previous state. It's so simple and is used by some of the world's leading Shopify agencies, such as Kurt Elster of EtherCycle and Kelly Vaughan at the Tap Room. If your store is gaining traction, you may have multiple users making changes. Often store owners allow team or app developers enter a store to add code. Sometimes mistakes happen and data gets deleted. You can reduce your business risk today and prevent a costly catastrophe by installing the Rewind.io app on your Shopify store. Get your first month of Rewind for free by simply responding to any of the welcome messages or emails you receive after you begin your 7-day trial and mention this podcast. Now, back to the interview. So they maxed out capacity as a result of the success of the app.
Yeah, because the way the API was originally designed was not to be used on the front end of a store. The API was originally designed for integration apps. And that's what most of the apps were back then. They were like, integrate with MailChimp, integrate with UPS, integrate with QuickBooks, integrate with something. And they would do back-end batch jobs. So like at night, it would sync your orders. But an app that lived on the front end of the store that did calls based off of like traffic. So if there was 1 million people on the front end of a store all adding something to the cart, it would take it down. So at first they weren't super crazy about the app. They're like, well, this is not really using the API the way we intended. But then merchants loved it and were raving about it. And it was like, it became the number one app like right away. And then Shopify figured out a way to make it work. They said, okay, well, we're going to have API throttling, and they just implemented a few things to make it work. And we kind of saw it, the potential of it early on. So right away, we kind of said, okay, well, what's the next app we're going to build? And so then we built product discount, and then we built store locator, and then options, and then quantity breaks, and then one by one. And then, yeah, like we were in my basement. First employees I had an unfinished basement, so it kind of worked out perfect. We just set up desks down there. And
the reason I love the story is because, it's a true startup story. Like 4 guys got together and ended up in a basement, whereas I think some startup stories that are successful now, maybe there's a few beers involved when the story is being told. They're very romantic. Yours is certainly very authentic. At what point did you, like you had a lot of success very early on with product upsell, but at what point did you guys realize, hold on folks, this has a lot of potential? Like, did you guys foresee the success of Shopify, the growth of e-commerce, early on? Or were you guys just quite happy to ride the wave and just enjoy what you were doing?
Yeah, so I think we did something a little bit different, and I can't take any credit because saying we're smart. It was just kind of like coincidental that we did this. So because we had good jobs and we were kind of doing this in the beginning on the side, we were 100% bootstrapped. We didn't have any type of investment or anything. It was just us building it. So we decided, like every other app back then, was one app on multiple platforms. So like people would have a loyalty app, this is just an example, but like one app on 6 different platforms. So it would be on BigCommerce, it would be on Magento. Back then, Volusion was really big. So they'd have the same, or on WooCommerce, one app, multiple platforms. We decided to build lots of apps on one platform. And instead of spreading out and learning 6 different APIs and 6 different platforms and trying to support it, we're like, why don't we just become the Shopify experts and just go deep on Shopify, build all our apps on Shopify? And yeah, it was definitely a risk because Shopify actually was the underdog. They were smaller, but because it was like a kind of a side thing, and we didn't mind taking a bit of a risk. We're like, well, let's just try it. There's no reason to spread everything out, and then it worked out to be a great strategy because obviously Shopify's growth, and you can see that now. But there was no way we could have known that back then. That's so obviously a huge amount of, I think, for anyone who was heavy in the Shopify platform back then, they're very fortunate because of the growth that Shopify has seen. So that was a lucky decision that I can't say we're like smart because we did it. It was just, it worked out really well.
But Jay, I have to give you some credit. You guys are definitely, or I would say should be accredited with, stacking apps. Like you guys built apps that complemented each other. Like even from a sales point of view, from your own side, like the multi-currency conversion app works with your Bold Cashier, works together with the multi-currency app. The upsell app now works with all of your other, loyalty apps. So you guys, from the outside looking in, for me, were always the people that were actually incentivizing people to install 2 or 3 apps that were going to boost sales. So I think you saw that before anybody else.
Yeah, I think it's because we went through a bit of a evolution with our company. It used to be we were trying to build as many apps as fast as we could. And I think at one point we actually got up to like 35 apps. And then about 1.5 years ago, we kind of really started to look inward and say, like, what problems are we really trying to solve for merchants, and what problems do we care about? I know one time, I think one of the biggest mistakes that, like, if anyone listening to this, like when you're starting a business, is generally most businesses don't fail because of a starvation of ideas. It's more of indigestion. So it's not a lack of things to do. There's sometimes too many, and you fail because of what you say yes to, not because of what you say no to. And so we had a bit of the, let's say yes to everything early on. And there's two types of things you can build when you're building a business. You can do something that makes money, but it might not necessarily increase the value of your company. So the best analogy, this is what we say internally. One day we were sitting around in a meeting and we kept having these like opportunities come up, and sometimes it would be like a university wanted us to build some software, and it was like not at all related to e-commerce, but even sometimes it was within e-commerce. Someone was like, hey, can you do this? And so one day we were sitting in a boardroom and we kind of said, we could just have all of our developers mow grass for $40 an hour and make money. We don't even why do we not do that? Like, why do we not, if we have 30 developers here, why do we build software? What if someone came to us and said, hey, can you guys come and mow this grass across the street? We'll pay everyone $40 an hour. And if it made money, why don't we do that? And so it's clear that we would never do that, but why not? And we were like, well, we don't, because that doesn't push the company forward. It doesn't increase the value of the company. It just makes money. And so we started to think very strongly. Everything we did, like, it doesn't matter if it makes money, like it should, but that's not the goal. Does it push the company in the direction that we want to go in? And so when we started to look at a lot of the apps we had, some of them weren't pushing the company to where we want to go. They were great apps. They were fine. They were making money, but they were not where we wanted to go. And if you go on our website now, there's a new tab that appeared about a year ago, and it's called Solutions. So we have our apps all listed out, but then we have what we call solutions, and there's only 6 of them. We have bold checkout, bold customization, bold loyalty, conversion, bold everywhere, and bold subscriptions. Those are the 6 core problems that we care about. And to solve them, we use a suite of apps. So like, for example, when you were like bold conversion, the apps that would fall under that are like Upsell, Discount, Motivator, The Brain, Bundles, apps that help increase conversion on a website. And so when we started to look at like, okay, well, once we had this framework of our 6 core solutions, there were some apps that didn't make sense. And so we've actually shelved probably a dozen apps in the last year.
Did you have internally, was there resistance to that? Did you have a couple of thousand customers that you had to email? Did you actually just not promote them, or did you sunset them?
So we just delisted them from the App Store, but there's still everyone who's using that app, it's still functioning. They're just no longer features being added. We don't have teams dedicated to them anymore, but there are still people actively using. Like if a store had it installed, we would never just turn it off on a merchant, but we just had to let merchants know, like, this isn't being supported. Like, we're going to keep it up, like on the servers, it's going to keep running, but we aren't actively adding any more features to it. It's kind of like, that was our definition of shelved.
Did anybody internally disagree, or, did you find it hard to make that decision, or is it, to me, it seems perfectly logical for a company like yourself expanding at such a rate to focus, stay in your lane, they say here.
Yeah, for sure. It was not easy. How do you say when we are trying to have certain growth and we have our projections and we're like, these are the numbers we want to hit, and we're very, very driven company. Like we have a lot of goals, and then so like to take an app that's making a lot of money and remove it from the App Store, and it actually, like, we saw the impact it made on our revenue. Like, it went down. But it took a little bit of a dip, but then it allowed us to focus more on the apps that we wanted to focus on. And long term, it definitely helped us. Like, the revenue and the numbers obviously came up, and then even went up even faster because of that focus that it allowed us to have. So yeah, it was a bit of a struggle. The first round we cut 4 off. I think it was. Could be getting these in the wrong order, but I think it was Marketplace, Donation Manager, By the Measurement, which was an app that lets you sell by like units of measurement. And I think Product Comparison, actually, which was the first one we wanted to build. So we delisted those 4. There was a lot of internal debate. We delisted it. We saw the dip, but then we saw things come back and be even more. And then there was actually a bunch more apps that we thought were a bit of a distraction as well. Got rid of those. So now we're down to, I think we have 21 public apps, and they all fit into one of the core solutions that we care about solving. And then, so now it's going to allow us to go deeper in those core solutions and really have a more well-rounded suite of products to solve those problems. So now everyone's on board. But yeah, it was definitely, there was a lot of debate, but that's something, it's interesting you asked that, because that's something we believe in embracing. Like, I use the word debate. I think dialogue is a better word for it. We like to have really healthy dialogue and get to the right decision. And it's not who's right, it's what's right. And there's times where it's like, it's not me, I'm not right, or someone else isn't right, but we go back and forth and we hash it out and we try to come to the right decision. I think that's been super critical in our growth, is being able to have the perspective that, like, it's not whose opinion that matters, it's what opinion is the right one that matters. And so in this case, this was the one that we had to get to the right decision. We eventually did. And, everyone kind of kept their egos and pride in check, and we just made the right decision.
It's interesting to hear that you guys have that mentality, considering that, you're growing aggressively. And if I was personally hiring 15 staff, there may be a perfect reason for the management team to actually encourage people to create more apps, but you actually did it the opposite way, to focus on the apps that were actually adding value. So, I have to commend you on that. Just to go back to the discussion that we had about hiring and growth, is there any pressure on you guys to continue that growth rate, given that you're so much now embedded in Winnipeg and people are depending on you for livelihood and employment? Or is that just natural progression? Once you do things right and turn up every day, you're quite confident that you'll continue to grow, even if it's only at the same rate as the economy. Does that make sense?
Well, I don't know. I always say, like, it's God willing. Like, there's definitely a lot of outside factors that can affect things, but I'm a strong believer. Like a lot of times, people say, like, what's the biggest, when you do your SWOT analysis and your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities and your threats, and you look at, like, what's the biggest threat, or like competition, or like worry, or like whatever, like what could it be? I am a firm believer, and I think everyone at this company is pretty much on the same page too. Like, that our biggest threat, if you want to call it that, is what happens within the four walls of our building. And we, like most companies, focus too much outward on things that maybe they can't even control, and they neglect what's on the inside of the building. So as long as we focus on building an amazing culture, a space where people can do their best work, where people, like, feel valued, and like the team, now we have to hope what we're building is going in the right direction. So I believe that e-commerce is not going to go away. I think that's a safe statement. And I think that it's going to keep growing. Every single projection on every single, it's just people are shopping more and more online every year. So all of that I'm not worried about. Now the question will come is, like, are the products that we're building and our roadmap relevant to where the market is going? That might be the only thing that kind of ever concerns me. And I think we're doing a good job at it. But, like, as far as what we focus on and what we worry about, the saying, like, if you're in a swimming race and you start focusing on your person, you start swimming into their lane. So we focus inside on doing the best of what we can do. We can't affect the competition anyway. And so we just have to trust that, like, our roadmap is aligned with where e-commerce is going. And if we do all that right, I think we will continue to grow. But, you never know. There's all kinds of other forces that could affect.
Yeah, but your answer makes, again, a lot of sense. Like, over here at the moment, we're dealing with Brexit. The UK has decided to leave the EU, and it's a complete unknown. It's kind of like Y2K. There was a lot of noise about it, in 99, 2000, and then it turned out that there was actually no real major issues. But really what you're saying is you can't be worried about whether who the next US president is, or whether there's going to be a hurricane, or whether there's going to be any major global issue. What you're saying is you guys internally within Bold are focusing on exactly what you do. And if you do that, you're probably a good bit of the way to being continuously successful.
Yeah, exactly. You can only control what's in your control. So it doesn't make it's wasted effort to focus on. There's 100 things. I mean, there's like people are saying the market's about ready to take a dip, and there's unknowns with definitely like we're heavily reliant on the US economy, even though we're in Canada, like 95% of our, it's maybe about like 80% of our customers are in the US. Our demographic basically just mirrors Shopify's. And so the US economy is a huge factor. The exchange rate is a big factor, which is something like people might not think about, but like because we're in Canada, if the, a $1 US is worth 1.3-ish, 1.34 Canadian dollars, if all of a sudden that changed, like if that 9 years ago it was at par. So like if that all of a sudden went down to par, that would be like instantly overnight taking a 30% hit on revenues. Like there's those factors. And I mean, we hedge out quite far on all of our foreign exchange and stuff like that to kind of protect it. But yeah, there's a lot of forces, but at the end of the day, all we can do is build the best team and the best product we can and hope we're steering the ship in the right direction.
Thanks for listening to the Milk Bottle Shopify e-commerce podcast. All of our episodes are available on Spotify and iTunes. We really appreciate the support of our sponsor, Rewind.io, the leading backup solution for your Shopify store. Get your first month of Rewind for free. Just respond to any of the welcome messages or emails after you begin your 7-day free trial and mention our podcast. Until the next time, take care.